on all three platforms, looks like. So my stream key didn't expire. That's great. Listen, I know it's been a while since I've streamed, and right now I am adjusting to a new schedule, and a lot of life stuff is going on. All positive, which is great. But bear with me for the next couple of weeks, at least probably 3 to 4 weeks, before everything kind of levels out and we're at a consistent schedule. So sorry I haven't been on for the last couple of weeks, but that's basically why. And in the year or so that I've done this, I've been on a roll and haven't really had many times off. So I'm pretty happy with how it's been going. But just as an explanation for those of you who are like, "Where'd this guy go? He's been going. Okay, he's been showing up every week. Where'd he go?" Basically, just there's a lot of transitional stuff in my life at the moment that is changing my schedule kind of on a regular basis. So because of that, stream probably won't be as consistent for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to do Sundays when that's available, and I'm eventually going to switch over to a different day in the middle of the week. And maybe if I can fit it in, 2 days a week. But that's not like that's all up in the air at the moment. So just bear with me while those scheduling changes happen. And we've got a lot of great stuff to cover today. A lot of people to make fun of, the usual. So first of all, I want to go over the collaboration between Zoran Mamdani and Barack Obama, which has caused a lot of stupid discourse online. So let's just get right into it and look at the source of the controversy. Let's see, like what is it that everyone is so pissed off about?
Hi, Ms. Jones. Nice to meet you. How are you? You look great.
I know who you are. I know who you are.
Who is he? He's the mayor of New York City. That's who he is. That's who he is.
I know your name.
You know my name?
Yeah, I know your name.
What's his first name?
Mamdani.
Mayor. His first name is Mayor.
Okay.
That's his name is Mayor.
Kids are funny.
Muhammad Madani. What Johnny? I went to the Donald store. I went to the Donald.
You went to the McDonald's store?
I went to the McDonald's store.
Yeah. What'd you get?
I get a chicken and a
Oh, you got chicken?
fry.
Did you have a sauce with it? Like a little dipping sauce? You got barbecue sauce, right?
Well, we're going to first read you a little bit of a book.
You guys want to do some reading?
You guys ready?
Okay.
Okay, I know that you guys as stream viewers are terrified of reading, so I won't subject you to such a thing. But basically, you get the idea here. Basically, Zoran Mamdani and Obama got together and they did a little school event, promoting, public schools and, promoting education in general, and just like a nice little public relations type situation, getting Mamdani's good, policies out there and associating them with Obama. Yeah, that's basically the crux of what's going on here. But what I wanted to talk about specifically is that I've seen a lot of critiques in general online, most of them coming from the left, like coming from, socialist types online, which I guess I include myself in this, but obviously when you're dealing with the online space, F Mamdani. Oh, well, okay, Jacob Seed, wow. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say you're a conservative, so you hate him because he's, a Muslim or whatever. But feel free to prove me wrong. But basically, there are a lot of people online who are like communist types, hammer and sickle emoji, the types, that kind of thing, Marxist Leninists, whatever. And their position is essentially like, Obama's a bad guy because Obama, during, presided over entrenching neoliberalism in the American system, which is true, 100%, capitulating to the banks and, of course, committing, like, lots of war crimes through his drone campaign, which had a lot of disastrous results. Not really as bad as what neoconservatives did by any measure, but obviously just objectively bad. So their position is basically that Zoran Mamdani has no business associating with Obama, that it is a mistake to interact with him at all. And to everyone filing in here, I am a fairly small creator, so all of the likes and shares that you can muster will have an outsized difference on the result of this live stream. So if I'm throwing myself at the unwashed masses and praying for mercy on that in that front. But essentially, they say, like, Zoran Mamdani shouldn't associate with this guy. He's a war criminal. You know what I mean? Zoran Mamdani, as a socialist, needs to make sure that the world hates Barack Obama, whatever. And while I don't disagree on the substance of, like, people should critique Obama, like I think you go far enough forward in history, there's going to be a lot of things about the Obama presidency that will be looked upon in a negative light. And in my personal opinion, I really think that he is a big part of why we got people like Trump. Not because, like, he caused people to be more conservative, but for, in a sense, he caused it because Republicans and conservatives generally are, like, insanely racist and reactionary. So the second that a black president came in, they all lost their shit. You can look at literally any media from the time. There were, like, insanely racist caricatures. They were criticizing him for things that they would never do for, like, a Republican or even a white Democrat. Obama was subjected to a lot of unfair criticism from the right. On the other hand, he was insistent on the we go low, they go low, we go high strategy, where, like, he maintained respectability politics. He didn't acknowledge how bad Republicans were. He acted like what they were saying was normal. And I feel like this normalized the kind of vitriolic, evil language that we see in far right conservative spaces, which are in many ways, like, normal conservative spaces nowadays. So I'm not, like, a guy who's not critical of Obama at all. Having said that, the left critique, the communist critique of doing this of Mamdani is basically hollow, in my opinion. Like, I really don't think that it's a good critique. I don't think it makes sense politically. I don't think that it is practical or morally makes sense, or even, like, you know what I mean? Like, politically, it makes no sense. And basically, this is why we're gonna have to deconstruct a few things. So first of all, generally speaking, when we're talking about, like, the left online, when we're talking about, like, pundits who come at things from a socialist perspective, from people who are, like, commentators from a socialist perspective, I think that they really approach everything from a default position of, like, if my idea was tried, then socialism would totally succeed and flourish. Like if a person who agreed with me on everything would just run for Congress, would just run for president, then, like, everybody in the country would, like, attain class consciousness and vote for what I want, and they would ditch the Democrats, they would ditch the Republicans. And, like, the problem with this is that they'll, like, look at someone like Zoran Mamdani or AOC or Bernie Sanders, so in other words, socialists who have actually succeeded at the level of politics, like on the federal national level, which is something that's basically unprecedented, only possible through the particular style of politics that Bernie, AOC, and Zoran have implemented, and which has created a really crucial foothold. And I think that a lot of people basically cannot cope with the fact that these guys are so successful. Socialists in general, myself included, kind of pride ourselves on having an evidence and material conditions, approach to politics. But the problem is, if you have a material or evidence-based approach, right, if you actually do in a sincere way, then you would look at the political environment where the only kinds of socialists who are succeeding are AOC, Zoran Mamdani, Bernie Sanders. Like, these are some of the most popular politicians in the country, and none of them started that way. You know what I mean? Like, all of them were universally, like, extremely unpopular, as a matter of fact, when they first made their debut on the national stage. But there are certain qualities that they have that allowed them to do it. And if socialists actually had a material or evidence-based approach, then they would try to kind of emulate this sort of thing. But instead, they basically call for the opposite. So socialists, like, if you look at the online socialist ecosystem and you look at the arguments that they're making, their ideal candidate is someone who is, like, relentlessly negative, endlessly critical of the Democratic Party, and advocating for positions and policies that are way outside of the Overton window. And their basically approach is that if you say this stuff over and over and over loud enough, then this will develop class consciousness. It'll bring people over to the far, far left. And, you know, imminently you'll have a dictatorship of the proletariat or whatever, you know, I mean, that's a very misunderstood term in general, but just a society that is ruled by and for the workers, essentially. Okay. So the problem is there is no evidence of any kind of politician who is relentlessly negative of the Democrats, who is relentlessly advocating for policies that are way outside the Overton window, who are, like, you know, successful in politics. There are examples of people who try to do this, and the examples, I guess, that come to mind are like the PSL candidates, the Party for Socialism and Liberation Party, whatever. The redundancy department, the Department of Redundancy department. Did I do that right? And someone like, who is it? Workers Strike Back. Oh, right. Sawant. Like, after she was a city councilor in Seattle, Kashama Sawant basically took on this approach of, like, and she was very critical before, but I would say she went from being like critical of the status quo and also offering lots of solutions, like the tax on Amazon, the Jumpstart stuff. But now it's more just like endlessly, relentlessly negative messaging in politics that seeks to just kind of create a left pole, and people will naturally gravitate towards it. There's no evidence that this works in any federal context, like zero, like literally none. And I feel like the problem is, you look at the people who actually are successful, like these three, like Bernie, AOC, Zoran, and it's actually like a relentlessly positive approach to politics, where you're always hammering home what it is that a socialist politician can do for you, right? And this has led to like extremely positive, like extremely favored politics, such as Medicare for all. A lot of aspects of the Green New Deal are extremely popular. Like, these things are all things that poll well. You know what I mean? Civil liberties for everyone. Like, these are things that, like, you poll people on the individual positions that AOC, Bernie, Zoran hold, and people love them. And they kind of relentlessly focus on those things as being positive. Now, the problem that I run into when I see these kind of socialist commentators, when I see people who are to my left, which I don't really agree with that characterization, because, right, being to the left is meaning that you want to overturn the status quo, in this case capitalism, and you want to replace it with something revolutionary. So socialism, as in it's revolutionary as in it would require a restructuring of the economy, right? It's not like revolutionary as in people are going to be out here with bayonets and, you know, storming the Bastille or whatever. So I think that I'm actually to the left in the sense that my set of policies, this approach, like supporting actually successful socialist politicians like Mamdani, AOC, Bernie, this is more likely to actually overturn the status quo. So I struggle to see how someone is to my left when they advocate for policies that patently will never change the status quo, in my opinion. That's my argument today, basically. It's kind of a classic case of survivorship bias, essentially. Like, these socialist commentators look at the politics and they say, well, the types of people who win in like a big way, they're not the type of people that I want to win, and the types of people that I want to win can't win in this environment. But I'm just saying that, like, you know, they, in their opinion, basically, if only the perfect candidate would emerge, then they would be the one that makes it through the filter, when in fact, if you actually look at what gets through the filter, it's this. And since they can't kind of cope with what's going on there, right, since they can't kind of cope with the fact that their politics is like extremely unpopular and frankly just like endlessly unsuccessful, endlessly failing, they contrive a lot of positions that aren't really based in reality. So that's where you get your AOCIA, your Zogran Mamdani. I don't know if you've heard that, where they like they substitute Zionist occupied government for the first part of his name. It's like it's something that like a 13-year-old would come up with, but it's honestly like dudes my age in a trucker hat with a beard and mustache saying that like this is what the proletariat actually believe, and it's very sad. So like I can't say that that is an intelligent way of looking at politics. It's kind of like a case of denial. Like, they have like a pathological like inability to confront reality, which is that there are numerous strategies being tried by the far left, by the center left, by all of us. And the ones that work are the ones that win, right? And they just can't really cope with that. They have to imagine that there's some essentially malignant force within the movement, that all of these people are a plant, all these people are a mole, trying to undermine the movement, when they're just people who sincerely hold their beliefs. Like, I think AOC, Bernie, and Zoran sincerely hold their beliefs and are not like CIA plants, right? And this is controversial in like a tiny part of the world, tiny part of the internet, much of which exists outside of the United States and is not invested or understanding of how US politics works. So when I look at it, I just can't help but think it's really embarrassing. And I think I have some advice for people who think that way, because I don't think that like I think that they are not hopeless or anything. I don't think that they have to think this way. And if you don't like the way that AOC and Mamdani do things in order to get elected and to accomplish their policy prerogatives, your alternative isn't working. So what do? I mean, I think the answer here is like to use some introspection about the political environment in which you find yourself. So like, what is it about our current material conditions that reward an AOC or a Mamdani while punishing the candidates who, by the way, are largely theoretical, right? These people are always saying that they want a certain type of candidate to win. And when you press them to say who it is, like all they ever say is just Rashida Tlaib, who doesn't want to run, isn't going to run, right? Like, so the candidate that they want that would appeal to them only exists in kind of a metaphysical sense. It's not like there's no person to point to. Even there isn't even a loser to point to, right? There isn't even someone to point to who's constantly getting their shit kicked in, that you could say, well, I want this person to win. The only people who have that, at least, are fans of like Kashama Sawant and PSL, where the problem isn't that the candidates don't exist, it's that they are like perpetual losers in their elections that they try. And if your answer, when you do a little bit of introspection about the material conditions, is just capitalism makes it impossible for a good candidate to win, a good candidate or someone who agrees with them, and you truly believe that, right? You truly believe that the system makes it impossible, then like you'd think the natural conclusion would be to like stop engaging in public politics at all and like either wait for the natural contradictions of capitalism to create those material conditions which would help your person win, or, you know, create your person in the first place. Because again, I cannot emphasize this enough. The candidate they want to win is not a real person who exists who can be pointed to. The subject of this video, the people that I'm talking about and criticizing here, they don't like have an actual candidate to point to. I personally think that like when they think about this, when they say when they think, well, does capitalism just make this impossible? Does the system make it impossible? So I should keep posting. I think the reason that they're kind of committed to just posting all day long as their politics is that like they aren't actually convinced that capitalism makes what they want impossible. Like they really think that if they just state their position over and over and over until the heat death of the universe, then that'll eventually turn the tables and everyone will just like come over to their side, essentially. You know what I mean? And you know, we'll have the revolution, which for these people is more similar to like a religious event than an actual like material event that'll happen. And I feel like the problem is that when you're this kind of person, you can speak to an international audience and you can basically get like a ready-made echo chamber that confirms that there is some group of people out there, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands, who agree with you completely, who feel the same way that you do. And it basically just exacerbates their lack of introspection. You know what I mean? It makes it so that these allegedly socialist, communist commentators and pundits can, you know, never really worry that what they're doing is either futile or impossible. Because there'll just always be a group of people who can tell them that it's okay. Like, yeah, we agree. Like the revolution's coming any day now, and they'll see tens of thousands of people saying that. And that's a minuscule amount in the context of politics, but it's a big amount in the context of, well, you're sitting here and you see your audience and like, it makes you feel good. It's pretty embarrassing. It's pretty sad, but you know what? They can do better. This is not something that you need to stick with forever. And if you think this way, I would just, you know, posit to you that there is socialist politics that is working in the world today. And I'm certainly not saying you can't be critical. Like, I've been critical of AOC. I've been critical of Bernie. I haven't really found anything to be deeply critical of Mamdani about. I personally am not deeply critical of him when it comes to this Obama situation. So, you know, I'm sure that in his tenure as mayor, there'll be something that pisses me off. This is kind of inevitable. Everyone pisses me off eventually, in some way or another. And that's okay. It's kind of a normal part of politics. So I'm not saying that if you have some reasonable criticism or thing that you think they could do better, that you're the target of this video, but I do think that you ought to look at what these people do, which is that they have a relentlessly positive politics where they are constantly advocating for politics which fall, or policies which fall just outside the Overton window. They want to push people just outside their comfort zone, and then you can back up the fact that these policies work with data, with results. Like you see, Mamdani has implemented his policies as quickly as possible so that he can get the stats on them, so he can use those in his social media. Like, there is a tactic here. AOC very much does the same thing. She also delivers quite a lot for her constituents. So, hey, Razor, welcome. So, like, if you look at what these people do, you see something that works. Like, you can't say it doesn't, unless your metric, and I've seen this is often the thing that they fall back to, which is a very weak position. Well, it hasn't changed fundamentally the nature of capitalism. And like, they'll basically always say, well, you know, eventually you need to challenge the very nature of capitalism. And I would just say, yes, that eventually does need to happen. I don't think the American public is in a place right now where they're going to do that. And I think that the American public has moved left on numerous issues. And when you look at these politicians and how that they have accomplished this, like their favorability ratings have weathered this time period where some people have moved left on issues such as Israel, such as Medicare for all, such as even universal basic income, which I wouldn't say belongs to like AOC types, but like, you know, nevertheless, in this period where people have moved on those issues, these people have maintained very high favorability ratings. And I think honestly, if they had just tried the approach of being maximalist left position on every issue, then I don't think that like sorry. If these people, if AOC, Bernie, and Zoran had been maximalist left on every issue, I think that there would have been less persuasive strength in the things that they were saying, because I do think, honestly, in the issue of persuasion, it has to happen in degrees. I don't think it needs to happen in minuscule, centimeter-long incremental steps, like to the point where a moderate liberal would argue that. But I do think like you need to go just outside of where people are comfortable and explain why they should be comfortable with that space that's further out, like Medicare for all, right? Like the you'll lose your health insurance argument has gotten weaker and weaker over time as people have, you know, been shown the benefits of single payer or universal healthcare. So like, that's only possible through the AOC, Bernie, Zoran approach. That's really not possible through like the PSL approach. I don't think that those organizations have actual persuasive power on liberals and independents in the same way. Maybe they do with like a minuscule number of people, but when you take the membership of these third parties and socialist groups and all that, it's a very tiny group of people. Whereas when you're talking about Zoran, Mamdani, AOC, Bernie, we're talking about people changing their position on the order of tens of millions of people changing their minds. It's just not like you literally have to like grade them on a curve in order to take what they're saying seriously. So I think that they should just be held to the same standard, and we should admit that they have very little persuasive power at all. I don't think we should label everything we see from politicians as politics. It makes it seem like you can't respond because it's politics, and only specialists should talk about it. While some politicians don't even know what their job is, they just know how to follow orders. That's an interesting point. I tend to kind of come at it from the opposite approach, where I think that you should make politics a more mundane, normal thing. Like, you don't need to be an expert to understand and have a stakes in politics, right? Like you should be an expert if you're crafting policy. Like if you're writing a new social security tax bill, you should have some expertise. But the politics is something that everyone in our society has a say in on some level. Like, we are a flawed democracy. So like I kind of come at it from the other sense that like you should be able to be confident in your kind of half-assed, semi-informed political opinions, essentially, because like you can't expect everybody to be an expert. This is why, and this kind of relates to how I feel about like socialist theory and even liberal theory, like political theory in general. I think if you have an interest in politics, like a special interest in politics, where you feel like that's almost like a hobby of yours or it's something you're like very fascinated with, then you are then like it would benefit you and you would probably enjoy reading political theory, whether that's your liberal theory because you're a liberal or your socialist theory because you're a socialist, whatever. But I don't think like in a world where everybody is a socialist, I think that it will resemble the way the world's always been, which is that the vast majority of people understand political theory only through like civics lessons in schools or through like secondary, like, you know, you learn about the social contract kind of in your history courses. That's some liberal political theory, right? But I really don't think most people need to be theory readers in the way that a lot of these leftists conceive of it. Like, you just don't, like, you should be informed, and you should like, you'll inevitably be drawing from a political theory just by having a position on politics. Like, you know what I mean? Because all of these are derived from just like the morality of the people who write it and their observations. So you should, like, by being informed, by living in a society that gives you the education, the basic education to understand like why things happen, and it'll be based on a theory, that's okay. Not everyone needs to be like reading theory on a regular basis. And frankly, a lot of people who do read theory right now, who are really into it and proudly into it, don't particularly understand it. They could use some guidance on it. We're talking about sources that are fairly old in a very specific context, with multiple interpretations. Like, it's something that you shouldn't take for granted that you understand it just on the first read, or that you take it at face value that you understand it. And not everyone is equipped to simply pick up the books and understand them just on the first read. And that's okay. That's normal. Like, that's normal with any old source. Like, if I read a book from the 1850s, like a novel, I'll probably understand the novel and maybe I'll even enjoy it. But if I don't have an understanding of the period, there's going to be some context in it that I miss, and like I'll have an imperfect understanding of it. And frankly, if I had read a summary of it from someone who is an expert, there's a good chance that I would have a better understanding of some of the themes and content. So like, it's not just cut and dry, like, do you or don't you read theory? The way people get their information is very diffuse and comes from secondary sources, and sometimes the secondary sources are better than one person who doesn't understand primary sources understanding of the thing that they're reading. Does that make sense? People have been brainwashed on this side. Oh, politics, politics. But is it really politics, or are they people who don't know anything? Or are they just incompetent individuals holding positions they don't deserve? Well, that is one thing, is that like part of the vote blue no matter who thing that makes things complicated and difficult, is that like sometimes people will elect someone and just have no litmus test whatsoever. And I think that like there should be the solution to this, in my opinion, on the Democrat side. The Republican side is kind of lost, because I think that they are committed to a kind of anti-empiricism, anti-logic, anti-knowledge, which, like, you know, this isn't true of literally every single Republican, but of the movement writ large. Like, that needs to be fixed before anything else can happen. But on the Democrat side, competitive primaries are basically the mechanism by which this should work, where like people have to campaign on their competence, people have to campaign on their morals and their ethics. So yeah, like I'm kind of running off topic here on this segment a little bit, but I think that like the left can do better, like socialist left can do a lot better in terms of analyzing politics, and that we need to fight back against this kind of defeatist posting forever politics, where instead of looking at the things that work honestly and in a sober fashion, we just kind of self-soothe and insist upon a candidate that doesn't even exist being the solution to our problems. And that'll wrap it up for that one, but I've got more. Let's talk about Hungary. So some of you might have heard that there was a momentous election in Hungary recently, where basically Orban, who is the head of the, I think it's Fidesz party. It's a far right party, extremely authoritarian political movement in Hungary, that basically for 18 years or so this guy has been in charge of the country. And in that time he has, like, listen, 16 years this man has been in charge, since 2010. All right. And in the time that he's been in there, he's done like so much evil shit. he banned the guy who was running against him, Peter Magyar, from appearing on state media and frankly all media. We'll talk about that for 18 months in the run up to the election. And Magyar wound up winning. Orban got overturned. So like imagine that. Imagine like voting for a presidential candidate who like was not allowed on the news. Like you never saw him. So it kind of speaks to the how much work the guy was putting in on the ground in order to win. And importantly, Democrats take note of this. Magyar was running on exactly how he was going to overturn all of the reforms that Orban put in place and how he was going to take out all of the cronies and henchmen that had been, disseminated throughout the system. So, like, I think that the Democrats here could definitely learn from that because that is not the Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries way of doing politics. He also gerrymandered Hungary completely to hell. Like as soon as he won, he reduced the size of their parliament into like 106 single member constituencies, so one parliament member per district or whatever. And he basically made a bunch of huge districts with the opposition in it with one member and a bunch of tiny little ones where everyone was loyal to Fidesz. So he just like spread it out so that like an additional 93 seats were given to Fidesz, basically, if I understand the numbers that I looked at correctly. And it gets a lot worse than that. Isn't Orban, who welcomed the Israeli prime minister with flowers, he loves Netanyahu. Like, yes, Orban loves Israel. He loves the Republican Party. He's like the hero of the global right, essentially. Like, he was seen by Republicans in many ways as a playbook for what they want to do, which is good. This is a good sign because, like, Orban lost because there were a lot more swing voters and all these mini fiefdoms that he created, all this gerrymandering shit. And it kind of reminds me of all the gerrymandering that Republicans are doing, where they are assuming that Hispanic voters are all going to remain exactly as loyal to the Republican Party as they were when they voted for Donald Trump in 2024. So, like, hopefully they miscalculated in the same way that Orban did. But again, 16 years. Like, this was no joke. And by all accounts, the Magyar's party actually had a way more comprehensive kind of playbook for what they were going to do to Orban and to his party and to the government. While he knows this person is already wanted by the international court and has also forgotten the anger of his people about him, he doesn't care. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't think Israel figured in much into this Hungarian election, but Hungary is a member of the EU, is my understanding, and if I understand it right, they've just been flaunting the rules and basically like completely spitting in the EU's face at every turn since he's been in charge. Another thing that Orban did is he offered citizenship and the right to vote to about 2 million ethnic Hungarians who lived outside of Hungary. They lived in neighboring countries. And these people were like extremely old, extremely conservative, heavily anti-communist voters, like that kind. They're pissed about things the USSR did, which like valid, but up to 90% of them support Fidesz. So like ridiculously bad. So I just wanted to show like the kind of guy, the whole world is already angry with the Israeli prime minister. Yeah, I mean, dude, the Israel is a pariah state that is propped up by the US military, like without a doubt. The things that they've done are so despicable, and they're so like the country is so unrepentant about these things. We're going to talk about this in a later segment, that I think any country or politician who associates with them is going to cause themselves problems in the future. And what's worse, Israel's actions are responsible for a lot of increased anti-Semitism. But again, that's a bit of a tangent. Let's watch real quick a video of what happened when this guy was Magyar was finally allowed back on Hungarian state media. I think that this is translated, so if it's not, I'll find one that is. But let's just check it out.
Pillanatra itt körbenézek, és
Yeah, okay. Let me see if I can find one where it's actually translated, because that would make my life a lot easier. Otherwise, I'll just blink myself off the screen. You can read the subtitles. Magyar back on news. Let's see if that works. No? Peter Magyar State TV interview. Let's see about that. Maybe that'll work. Let's see.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Hell yeah, let's go. I found it. Okay, fantastic. So we're not going to watch all of this.
Congratulations on the result. And
For context, this is the state media that banned him. And by the way, Orban basically made it so that the state wouldn't run advertisements on any news networks that opposed him. And I guess this was enough of the ad revenue for those stations that a lot of them basically capitulated to him. Sound familiar? In order to get him, in order to do what he wants. Trump just had to write an angry letter. He didn't even have to do anything, actually. Our institutions are much weaker even than that. But basically all of the independent media went out of business because of this, because of the targeting by the government. And Fidesz bought up all of the small media outlets. So basically, like, media in general in Hungary is very state captured in many ways, thanks to Orban's, even the small ones. But this is literally state TV, and they didn't. He's going on only because he won the presidential election. He was literally banned.
What's on the minds of the Hungarian people now is how those promises made during the campaign will be fulfilled, and how the lives of Hungarians will change. What is your response to this? Pause. As you're aware, back in February, they introduced their government programme. They conducted an international press conference, and furthermore, they also publicly announced their commitments for the initial 100 days.
Good morning, Madam Editor. I'll just look around for a moment, and it feels good to be here. 1.5 years after September 26th, 2024, when I was last here, when you let the leader of the biggest party in.
Excuse me, Mr. President. We called you on multiple occasions.
I don't remember.
We have emails, and obviously the two press departments will clarify this among themselves through correspondence, because these emails are available.
Madam Editor, we already played this on Kossuth Radio. They didn't call or let me in until January 2026. If you'd forgotten, there was a protest here too, everything right here on Konyugunda Street, but there's no problem. I bear no personal grudge, not even for you slandering me, my family, my loved ones, and ordinary people, morning, noon, and night.
That we insulted his family, please don't be offended, but on behalf of all my colleagues, I'd like to correct that.
It's been said quite a few times here in the studio that my young children aren't speaking to me, even though they live with me, and then yesterday I was with them. For the first time in many weeks, I finally managed to have lunch with them.
I don't believe that a presenter said this.
In any case, I can assure you that we hold no personal resentment. But a core element of our program is that this lie factory will cease to exist after the formation of the TISA government. We will immediately suspend this fake news service that is currently operating here, and we will establish independent, objective, and impartial conditions together with other parliamentary parties and professional organizations.
For some reason, I cannot imagine a similar statement from a high-ranking Democrat to, like, the head of ICE or something, even if they win the next election. And this is a lot of the problem that I have with the Democratic Party.
That this propaganda that was going on here, would you allow me to finish, given that I've already waited 1.5 minutes for these few words?
I didn't mean this answer.
Thank you very much. So we will create the conditions for independent, objective, impartial media. We know there's no perfect media, but what has been going on here since 2010, something that even Goebbels or the North Korean dictator would have admired, where not a single true word was uttered, that certainly cannot continue. I see that ever since Hungarian people, with unprecedented authorization, changed the system on April 12th, because never before have so many people voted for a political community as they did now for TISA, around 3,300,000 people, and we will have at least 140 representatives in parliament, maybe 142. I see. There's been some movement since then, and for the first time in 1.5 years, my press conference was broadcast live, which was the day before yesterday.
Given the respect due to his office.
See, when you have a fighter, when you have someone who's willing to stand up for your people, it really has a persuasive effect, even on independents. And I think this is why I tend to advocate for like an AOC presidency. And I really hope that she fights hard in the primary in the next presidential election. I'm really hoping that she's able to run, because I think even if you're not the most popular candidate in the field right now, April 2026, there's a lot of room in a competitive primary to make the case that you'll be that person to stand up. And I think that that's what the American people really crave. And I think that's what the Hungarian people craved too. And I think the strongest thing about this coalition, which, by the way, this guy is like pretty far right, honestly, by US standards. Like, he's not a leftist by any means. He's like a center-right liberal, is my understanding at best. And it's really about the plan that he had, which is to dismantle all of these oppressive policies and to create a new status quo. That, I think, is the main takeaway from this, that there needs to be a tangible, feelable program that will undo all the bullshit that Trump did and also institute something new and better. And I think that this is where Democrats struggle, where like even as Trump is at historically low approval ratings, Democrats are also at historically low approval ratings. And I think it's because they really just don't present that kind of alternative.
I'm still the TISA party president, Ms. Editor, still.
But he is Hungary's next prime minister.
Well, we'll see about that. I will not be going to the president, to the outgoing president, and I truly hope that he will schedule or convene the session of the Hungarian parliament at the earliest possible date. I can tell you, also in response to your question, that the TISA government will represent every single Hungarian citizen. It will represent Fidesz voters, Mi Hazánk voters, just as it will represent TISA voters. Every day we will work for this, I personally and my colleagues as well, so that every Hungarian person can live well and that there is order, peace and security in this country. And I'm very happy that they gave us the opportunity, that the Hungarian people give us the opportunity to prove, for example, to Fidesz voters and also to our compatriots who watch this propaganda that not a single word of the accusations made here is true. The TISA government will work for peace, and among other things, the TISA government will maintain the southern border fence. Unlike Viktor Orban, we will not release 2,200 legally convicted human traffickers. Furthermore,
I mean, first of all, banger. And I love that he gets a like national victory lap of telling off all of these freaks. I don't understand why these people even hold those positions. They don't deserve any of those things. If you are a president and you don't put your people first, then you don't deserve to represent these people. Well, I think a lot of that comes down to the interpretation of what people think means putting the people first. There are people who think that putting them first means just instituting a like racial pogrom against any immigrant. And I think that that's the kind of energy that got Orban in the first place. So like, same with Trump. So a lot of it is that like people's conception of their own interests is all out of whack in a lot of ways. But that's why you need a persuasive exercise. Like you can't just say, oh, well, these people like, okay. On the one hand, I can say with some confidence that conservatives in the world, in this international movement of conservatism, have this like xenophobic, ridiculous conception of how the world is, and they want policies that are just patently destructive, don't help anyone, and which will, you know, accelerate climate catastrophe. But on the other hand, when you're a politician, your job is to work in the environment you're in. So you like have to persuade these people, which is why I'm very glad I'm not a politician. But, you know, this is why I say that relentlessly positive politics are the way to go, because it's the thing that works.
Unlike the current situation where Viktor Orban's son, Gaspar Orban...
Oh, and sorry to interrupt sorry to jump back and forth, but relentlessly positive politics doesn't mean you never criticize your opponent. And in fact, you look at AOC, Bernie, and Zoran, they are very critical of the right and of the leaders of the right, and they very much are down to throw down and say, you know, what this person wants is bullshit. They have policies that are going to hurt you. Relentlessly positive doesn't mean never critical. They're absolutely compatible. Yeah, I don't mean to prioritize them if something is wrong, but I mean, for example, you should make them safe and comfortable in their homelands. But if you're not doing any of those things, you don't have the right to represent them. Well, safety in the homeland, as defined by the right, just means don't let any immigrants in ever, even if letting in immigrants would like help your country with labor problems or help your country with birth rate problems, or, you know, create a more diverse and inclusive society that is in the long run better off. Like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of this comes down to what people conceive of these kind of concepts you're throwing out. Not everyone feels the same way about them.
Sent 200 soldiers to Chad, knowing that half of them might lose their lives. Unlike Gergely Gulyas, who would have considered sending soldiers to Iran if Donald Trump had asked the government to. The TISA government will continuously work for peace. And for example, an element of our program, and they already asked about this on Kossuth Radio earlier, is that we will maintain the utility cost reduction, but only extend it, because 1.5 million of our compatriots heat with firewood, where there was no utility cost reduction at all. But the Orban government quadrupled the system usage fees. And Lirinc Mezaros, pardon me, let me just finish, really. Lirinc Mezaros, whom everyone knows, I believe even the viewers here, is Viktor Orban's wallet and his straw man. Lurin Smesaros is the kind of person who can't read or write, and frankly can't really speak much either. I met him. He became 5 times richer in 10 years than the English royal family did in 400 years. Everyone feels the absurdity of this, and it's no accident that TISA received such a mandate, because meanwhile, 1 million retired compatriots, Madam Editor, live below the subsistence level. 400,000 Hungarian children, while we are speaking here now, live in deep poverty after 16 years of the Orban government. Hundreds of thousands of Hungarians don't get food, healthy food on their tables. And while here, in this live factory, Attila Varhegi and his people burned 160 billion forints yearly with overpriced contracts and lies, 200 to 300 of our compatriots die, freezing to death in winter in their own apartment, in their own home. Meanwhile, since 2019, the government has not raised the social firewood budget, even though the price of firewood has more than doubled since 2019. And for instance, 20 billion forints were wasted here, even by you, on spreading the falsehoods of the non-existent TISA program, which the court has explicitly ruled to be entirely untrue, not a single word of it. Here at this very table, you listen to people who lied morning, noon and night. So editor, our program will be to bring home the EU funds that the Orban government couldn't bring home. We will finally kickstart the Hungarian economy, which they haven't been able to start for 4 years. We will curb inflation, which was a European record.
Mr. President, we will now elaborate on these in detail in this conversation. At least, I had intended for us to use our time for all of this.
I don't care what she has to say. I just wanted to show you what someone who actually fights for their people looks like, okay? And it's not someone who I agree with politically, but we have to think about what a political program that convinces people looks like and how you can overthrow systems where they're gerrymandering everything to shit, where they are rigging it as much as they possibly can against us. This is the only way. It's where you have a clear program, where you have clear criticisms of the opposition, and where you offer something new and better. So I'm sure that Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are huge fans of my program. So when they see this, I'm sure they will totally reverse their positions and do something better. One hopes. We were just talking about Israel, so I think it's a good time to bring this up. So some of you may have noticed that there's a slight kerfuffle in Iran over, the entire world's oil supply, essentially, where Trump is repeating week after week that he's defeated Iran. And then, on the weekend, as soon as trading closes, you find out that everything he said that week was a lie. I just wanted to walk you through something that I ran into about Israel primarily, but, it relates to the Iran war because a lot of the coverage that this report I'm about to go over with you is complaining about has to do with the Iran war in general. So basically, here, let me pull this up for you. I came across this on Twitter. I don't know who Nick Cleveland Stout is, but apparently there's the Israeli government released an official ranking list of the world's biggest anti-Semites. And you'll notice that Greta Thunberg is number 2, while Nick Fuentes, literal neo-Nazi, is number 8. And Tucker Carlson, actual neo-Nazi commentator, is 10. So that's confusing. And, far be it for me to just believe a random Twitter report. So here is the report. I don't speak Hebrew and I wasn't able to get it translated. But here's the thing, and here's the thing that he was citing is down here somewhere. Was that it? Did I just pass it? Nope. It's not gonna be very intelligible to us, but here it is. Look. Here is the rankings with Dan Bilzerian at the top. I haven't heard about Dan Bilzerian for a trillion years, it feels like. So I have no idea what that guy's doing. I have no intention of revisiting that part of the internet. Maybe he is a raging anti-Semite. Maybe he just doesn't like Israel. Greta Thunberg number 2, blah blah blah. So okay, here's the translated kind of version of it that I took a look at. So just so you see that it's all above board, that it is actually referencing an existing study or report that was put out by the the Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, which, good God, can you imagine the things they put out? You will not win in any way, not because Iran is strong or anything like that, but simply because you are attacking them. I assume you mean the US, unless you're saying the Concernicus live stream is deploying intercontinental ballistic missiles. Not because Iran is strong or anything like that, simply because you are attacking them while they have nothing to lose. They will defend until their last breath. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is that they don't really have any exit strategy. Like, I've seen some stuff from Trump saying that he's going to like buy their uranium in exchange for them promising not to do nuclear enrichment or something, which is I got a lot of deja vu when I heard that, because that is literally the Obama deal that got torn up by Trump in kind of a performative vice signaling display as soon as he became president, I think the first time. So even though Iran has said they're not doing anything of the kind, it's kind of funny that when Trump lied and said that that's his big plan, it was basically just reiterating the Obama deal that he himself tore up. Anywho, Greta Thunberg is number 2. Candace Owens is 4, which I think is kind of valid. Like, she's always kind of posing the JQ, right? But this report is kind of ludicrous for a few obvious reasons. The idea that these people are like the idea Greta Thunberg is actually a anti-Semite is absurd, because the entirety of her posting about Israel is just saying that like she would like them to stop committing genocide against the Palestinians, which is a very commonly held belief. How commonly, you may ask? So a poll from 2026 in August, just like not that long ago, August 2025, says that about half of Americans believe that Israel is committing genocide. Then, an October 2025 Washington Post poll showed that a full 39%, almost 40% of Jewish Americans believe that Israel is committing genocide. So, like, the way that they are rating whether a statement is, anti-Semitism or not, is clearly not based on that, because like they consider any post that says Israel's committing a genocide to basically be a act of anti-Semitism, just the way that they construct this. And just to break it down further, they basically used ratings to like rate whether something is anti-Semitic or not, and they based it on the level of influence, which includes like how many followers you have on Instagram or how many news appearances you make. So obviously Greta Thunberg is rated pretty high in that category. And then they use a risk score to match with that, and if you have a high risk score and a high level of influence, then you're considered a way bigger threat of anti-Semitism, which is how I think Greta Thunberg ended up at the top. But the terms that they include in their risk score essentially include like saying that what Israel is doing is a genocide, criticizing Israeli strikes against Lebanese civilians, like all of these things, criticizing military actions that are joint US military actions between the US and Israel against Iran. This report would classify all of that into the risk score. So your risk score would go up if you made 100 posts saying that you don't like, children's schools getting bombed, which, I don't know. I don't think that that's anti-Semitic at all to say that you prefer that children's schools, don't get bombed. Greta has all my support. The reason I support her in the first place is that she tried to do something that no one else could, and she did not hesitate to break the siege. Yeah, she did the Gaza flotilla thing, which, like, I think it was mostly an exercise in creating awareness, for advocacy, which is good, but I don't think it was like, the situation is so dire over there. The military has such a tight grip on Gaza that like the actual ability of such a thing to bring real aid to the Palestinians is very limited, but I think it's more of a public relations kind of advocacy, awareness thing, which is in and of itself very commendable and good. Israel is weaker than people think. Do you know why they face an unarmed people with missiles, weapons, and planes and possess all kinds of protections, yet they still feel a group that doesn't even have a quarter of what they possess? This is true to a degree, but I would say, like, in the region of the Middle East, as long as Israel has the full unconditional backing and support of the United States of America, which it basically does, I appreciate she's trying to do what we all want. Yeah, me too. Obviously, yeah, she's doing a billion times more than your average person is, especially the post all day style of, online communist or whatever. But Israel very much is, a hegemon in the region, essentially. Like, you really can't check their power. Like, they are maybe, like, every time I've heard someone say that they're a paper tiger, it kind of hasn't panned out, essentially. You know what I mean? Like they do exercise what I can only describe as hegemonic control in the region. While Iran is able to like strangle the Strait of Hormuz and like use a massive leverage because of its political position, like its geographic positioning, and it's a very hard place to invade, like even for Israel and the US, like they can leverage that, but like force to force, army to army, air force, all these things, Israel is able to exert essentially like hegemonic power. And some weird things about this report too is that it went out of its way to mention Miss Rachel, which if you don't know is literally like a kindergarten content creator who has like millions of followers. She basically, it's like Sesame Street basically, but it's like it's her own independent channel essentially. And they basically, she said, I don't like it that children are dying in these wars, and they count that as an act of anti-Semitism essentially. But there's a few things I wanted to draw attention to that about the character of the state of Israel and of the politics of its people. And I hope that I've kind of shown here already just through the polling that like the way American Jewish people and the way the Israeli population view politics and view the conflict in Israel is quite different in many ways. So it's not really about the religion of Judaism. It's about something deeper politically, and it's about far right politics. So this report acknowledges essentially that like anti-Semitic incidents and attacks um are very closely related to all of our strikes on Lebanon, Gaza, the West Bank, our latest war of conquest with Iran. They're basically like, the report is like, yeah, every time one of these happens, anti-Semitic incidents and posts go up. Some of that is actual legit anti-Semitism, neo-Nazis online saying things that are anti-Semitic, but they fudge the issue. They blur the lines by including just like Israel is committing genocide with the Jews control the world. Like those two statements would basically factor in equally into their risk score. And the report doubles down and says that like these incidents are not a result of Israel's choices at all. Like they're basically just saying that like war imagery, humanitarian narratives, and political campaigns are the reason that people are more against Israel than ever. They just see it as a message. They're basically saying, oh, it's just the optics. It's just the optics. You know what I mean? Like they will not acknowledge that there is a genuine disagreement with the actions that Israel is taking along with the United States. If rejecting what Israel is doing is anti-Semitic, then call me anti-Semitic, whatever names you want. I don't want to stand in front of my children in the future while I support the genocide of children and unarmed people. See, this is what Razor just said is like perfectly illustrative of the problem with Israel and the pro-Israel lobby's approach to anti-Semitism, which is that the term itself is diluted, where like it's one of the oldest, most prevalent, most violent forms of prejudice, anti-Semitism. You know what I mean? In the world, people are very hostile to Jewish people, in a way that manifests in like violent, irrational, racist, fucked up incidents. So with that in mind, the fact that they're doing this, in my opinion, is quite reckless, because they're literally just diluting the term. They're saying like, yeah, we are the Jewish state, and we say that if you oppose military actions by us against civilians, then that makes you an anti-Semite. And what people are going to do is just what Razor did, which is like valid in many ways. Say, well, then the term has no meaning. Fine, call me that then. Fine, like whatever label is ascribed to someone who is anti-genocide, I proudly bear that label. And I think that like it's just patently absurd, right, to say that a climate activist who's against genocide in Palestine is on the same level as like Nick Fuentes, literal neo-Nazi. He actually advocates for like anti-Semitism, just like prejudice against Jews because they are Jews. He said he wants a total Aryan victory. He denies the Holocaust. Like it should be pretty intuitive how these things are different. And the fact that like, if you look at what this report suggests as a solution, it's really bad. They basically want the social media companies of the world to adopt in their terms of service a definition of anti-Semitism, which includes any and all criticism of Israel as anti-Semitism. And effectively, you saw that around 40% of American Jews believe that what Israel is doing is genocidal. If this definition was adopted by all the social media companies, then what would happen is that it would effectively be silencing any Jewish people who oppose the genocide. And like, this is not, they shouldn't silence anybody, right? But it especially doesn't make sense to silence Jewish people for their beliefs about the Jewish state, right? And say that their criticism is anti-Semitic, like they are anti-Jew because they hold this position. That just doesn't make any sense, I would think, intuitively, morally. And I think just to bring this back to U.S. politics, which is kind of my shtick, Democrats like are always saying that like they've kind of accepted the reality that most people in the US and especially Democrats don't like what Israel's doing. So the new thing they're saying, and even Bernie Sanders is guilty of this, I don't like it, is that they say that this is Netanyahu's war, okay? And if you've seen my channel at all for any period of time, we've looked at a lot of polling of the Israeli population on political issues, and if anything, they're moving to the right over time, right? Basically, as a result of October 7th, in many ways, they were already moving in this direction before that, but that's another thing. They precipitously moved right after October 7th, which is very predictable, expected kind of thing. Like after 9/11, the United States moved right. These kinds of attacks, like, have this outcome often. Doesn't make it morally right for people to do that, but it is, a thing that happens. But it's really likely that Netanyahu is going to be the least extreme prime minister that Israel has ever had moving forward. Like in the future, we'll look back on Netanyahu as like the most far left prime minister, and that's like a very plausible political outcome in the elections that are coming up in Israel. And it also comes up a lot that kind of destiny types, like lib globe emoji types online, basically accuse the left, like the far left, like myself, of believing in the omni cause. And if I understand that criticism correctly, it's basically that like everything is related to Israel Palestine. Capitalism is Israel Palestine. Policing is Israel Palestine. What you call it, like surveillance is Israel Palestine. Censorship is Israel Palestine. Anti-Trump is Israel Palestine. All of it. And their criticism is that like this isn't the way the American people think. It's not a good way to do politics. And I don't really agree with that criticism because I think Israel is such an extreme case politically that it actually serves as a good litmus test that covers a few different areas. So, for example, you've got a Democrat running in a primary, and they're getting AIPAC money, they're getting J Street money, whatever, Zionist organizations, and by that I mean organizations that believe that Israel should exist specifically as a Jewish ethno state. Those organizations are giving them money, and they say like, vote for me. I'm anti-surveillance. I'm anti-censorship. I hate Trump's authoritarian tendencies, right? And I support Israel. So if you're looking at that as a Democrat primary voter, like there's obvious questions that you ought to ask. Like, okay, you don't support surveillance, then like why do you support Israel, which implements an insane amount of surveillance against Palestinians, which supports in many ways the American surveillance state? It supports it gives support to private entities in the US that do insane amounts of surveillance, like Oracle. Like, even we're going to talk about this later, but there was a huge surveillance deal with Madison Square Garden, and like there's overlap with people who worked with Oracle and people who worked with that. You say that you don't like censorship. Well, you're supporting Israel, whose official position is that you ought to make it so that a Jewish American posting on social media that genocide is bad would have their post deleted. Like, that is obviously censorship. How could you support such a thing? Or like they say, oh, I hate Trump's authoritarian tendencies, but then it's like you support Trump's #1 fan. Like, of all the countries in the world, no country has a higher approval rating of Trump than Israel. Not even close. So it's like, as a litmus test, I actually think it's pretty much fair game. And I think that like it's not the omni cause. It's more just that like there are issues that are morally important, where it is important to elect people who are consistent, because you don't want someone to just like blow smoke up your ass and say, oh yeah, I'm anti all these things, and then they just go to Washington and proceed to implement all these things that you hate, right? And a great way to protect against that is like to find someone who, you know, consistently says, well, I don't like censorship, so naturally I don't really care for what Israel's doing and don't want to give them unconditional aid, right? So it's a lot more common sense, I think, than it's portrayed by these types. But of course, you know, Destiny types are very sensational in their criticisms of the left. I am someone who currently prefers the two-state solution, but the ideal solution is to expel these extremists from power in Palestine because they are originally occupying Palestine due to the Balfour Declaration. Also, after October 7th, we discovered that the Palestinians have the right to expel Netanyahu and his group because they've killed many Palestinians. How can you ask them to trust them now? I mean, okay, like, in terms of two-state, one-state solution, I do think that, like, there's kind of no point advocating for one or the other, but it's more like one state solution with civil rights for all is obviously the cleanest, most logical solution. But the problem is there are like severe, like you said, extremists. There are some extremists in Palestine, but the ones that are the main problem are the settlers in Israel, right? Who are extreme far right, often terroristic groups of people who have a large track record of like attacking civilians, all this stuff, and the IDF and all of its actions, all this stuff. That's kind of the elephant in the room. Two-state solution has the problem of putting all of the extremists on the Israeli side in one state and putting them next to Palestine. And what are they going to do? Probably the same thing they want to do now, which is like, you know, invade Palestine. Like, it's not like they care. Like, Iran is a second state, right? Lebanon is a second state. It doesn't really seem to stop them from doing anything. I think, frankly, any solution that is implemented would have to have some kind of third-party UN neutral observer that kind of facilitates the creation and securing of a new political system where everybody has civil rights. Whether that's two state or one state, I think that that's actually like you could feasibly do that with both solutions, but I think that the baseline has to do with whether there will be an authority outside of Israel Palestine that is able to facilitate and guide a transition into a new kind of government where people just all have rights. You know what I mean? If we look at all the wars between Netanyahu and his group against the Palestinians, we will find that Netanyahu has killed much more than Hamas has throughout its existence in Palestine. Yeah, obviously. Like, I don't really care for Hamas, and I don't think it's politically expedient to like support vocally Hamas or anything like that, but if you do the tally, if you want to do the like utilitarian, like who did what, who did the worst thing, we'll like count the bodies kind of thing. It's pretty obvious that Hamas is like Hassan said, unfortunately, the lesser of two evils. So like that is, I think, supported by the evidence, but that doesn't mean that it's like that doesn't mean that much, honestly. What the main thing is that every Palestinian and every Israeli need to have equal rights under the law, and Israelis need to not have the ability to do this territorial expansion, attacking civilians thing. And certainly we should not listen to the Israeli government's request to heavily censor all of our media to make it so that criticizing Israel specifically is functionally not allowed in a public space. You know what I mean? That's ridiculous. We've got a couple more. Ugh. I need to relax. I need to let my vocal cords get a little bit of a rest here. So we're gonna watch a video together, which is on the longer side. It's like 12 minutes. About Waymo. So who is the extremist here? Hamas originally came because of the oppression and repression. They are protecting their people. How can you ask Hamas to be silent when you are the one causing the problem they came to solve? I don't ask Hamas to do shit. I don't have any request of Hamas at all. I would say, from a political messaging perspective, when you're speaking to Americans, not you, I meant Israel. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, like, yeah, Netanyahu was delivering sacks of cash to Hamas to prop them up as a force that he felt could be controlled and manipulated, essentially, to always create like this is so pretentious, I can't think of the alternative though, a casus belli, like a reason to commit war crimes, essentially. Like, he propped up Hamas because it would give him pretext to continue building greater Israel, which is kind of his goal, along with like Ben Gvir and Smotrich and all these people. So like, no. But I think from a political messaging perspective, not exactly what you said, but this is related, there's not like a benefit essentially to like loudly taking Hamas's side in an American politics context. So like there's just no reason to. But I don't that doesn't mean I need to sit here and condemn them all day long either. That's kind of a trap too. And that's why I really support Zoran Mamdani's strategy of just like emphasizing civil rights for Palestinians and Israelis alike, because like that is ultimately the goal. Anyway, there's been a lot to do about Waymo, specifically people on the left, like leftists, socialists, communists, whatever, people who agree with me on almost everything, are basically like reflexively anti-tech. More Perfect Union's a great example of that kind of sloppulist bullshit. But I wanted to kind of, let's hear it straight from them. And then, I have some kind of counter arguments about how we should handle this stuff, because I personally, as a socialist, believe that civilian deaths by vehicle are like bad for society. And I think the working class is actually much more functional while being alive. So I won't spoil the arguments I'm going to make too much, but let's watch what these folks have to say, and then I'll respond after. And I may or may not pause it several times during the video to opine.
I'm in the back of a car in San Francisco. There's no one at the wheel. Just a few years ago, this was controversial. Now, it's everywhere in San Francisco. Being a driver used to be a decent job in America. But here in the Bay Area, over the next decade, it might not be one.
Waymo has driven more than 100...
He's talking about being an Uber driver, by the way. So I feel like already kind of a ridiculous premise, because Uber is one of the most extractive, abusive companies ever. And I guess just because it's become the status quo, right? Like it's become the new taxi driver. I guess More Perfect Union feels obliged to act like being an Uber driver is like a great thing to be, that like is a great position for a working class person to be in. But I mean, that's really stupid, right?
100 million miles without a fatality.
Driverless cars don't drive drunk and they don't drive distracted.
Waymo says improving safety on the roads is the whole reason it exists.
Waymo is already in Phoenix, Austin, Los Angeles, Miami. But that's just the start. Millions of Americans drive for a living. What happens when the second richest company in the world wants to make them irrelevant?
It's going to be just a hole in the bottom of a bucket of a local economy. Just suddenly money just leaves the city in that Waymo.
Drivers saw a preview of this last decade, and they're still recovering.
He drank himself to death because he lost his pride, he lost his livelihood.
This isn't a story about whether self-driving cars are safe. This is a story about what happens to society if they are. Who wins, who loses, and why none of this is as clean or inevitable as one company wants us to think.
Yes or no, does Waymo employ humans located remotely to help its vehicles? In what countries are these employees located?
The Philippines.
So I think that's like right about here. I wanted to hear directly from someone impacted firsthand by Waymo's launch, a driver.
Right there.
I love using Uber, especially in my free time or when I want to earn some money, but it won't be something essential in my life. I work and study, and when I have any free time, I just use it. The thing that capitalism is chronically struggling with and can't do, and which it promises it can fix over and over, but it can't, is when jobs are just on the whole removed and are not necessary anymore, and you cannot retrain those people to do different things. Like capitalism doesn't really provide the social safety net that you need in and of itself. Like there are social safety nets in Europe that do provide a minimum standard of living, but those were implemented by people who believed in socialism and are now maintained by kind of neo-lib types for the most part. But the problem here isn't really being replaced. It's that like when you are replaced by an objectively great technology that like helps people, that's a bad thing for you. And if you're a slopulist, the goal is just to get as many slopulist votes as possible. So you just say, oh, well, this is bad, this is anti-worker or whatever. But capitalism is anti-worker. Replacing person-driven cars with self-driven cars, as we'll look at, is good.
Alejandra agreed to meet me in a Waymo. Unlock. There you go. We're headed to an office building where a ruling changed her life.
10 years ago, I wake up, get ready with my kids, drop in the school, work for 6 hours, coming back to pick up my kids, go home, cook, clean, and working for 2 more hours. That's it. And I take Saturdays and Sundays off.
That life was built on a hidden subsidy. Rideshare companies had great apps. They also had venture capital, billions of it. That let Uber and Lyft lose money on every ride until the taxis were gone.
Normally, in the past, if I get a trip in the city for more than 20 minutes, probably they're paying me $30. But now they're paying me $8, $6, or $12.
After they cornered the market, Uber and Lyft have been squeezing wages down ever since. Now the over 1,000 Waymos in the area are pushing wages down to the bottom.
Right now, I'm working 12 hours a day. It's a little bit sad because I don't have time for my kids.
In some ways, this has always been Silicon Valley's goal in the taxi industry. Human drivers were a placeholder, the cheapest way to hold the market until self-driving technology caught up.
Google's doing the driverless thing.
Yeah.
Tesla's doing the driverless thing. Apple's doing the driverless thing. So the question for a tech company is, do you want to be part of the future, or do you want to resist the future?
A who's who of corporations chased it. Most quit. One pulled ahead.
Waymo.
Welcome, Waymo.
A subsidiary of Alphabet or Google. The parent company bet an estimated $30 billion on the technology.
So this is where it all went down, huh? Where it was all decided?
Yeah.
In 2023, the California Public Utilities Commission voted on whether Waymo and a competitor could expand without drivers. People showed up.
Are you on the side of greedy tech companies and their profits and robots, or are you on the side of human beings? We urge you to vote no.
Others, often funded by the self-driving industry, had an answer.
Waymo and Cruise's technology, policies, and procedures have successfully demonstrated a commitment to passenger safety by meeting the Passenger Safety Plan minimum requirements.
The vote is 3-1. The item passed. The motion passes.
People who drive for a living lost. Alejandra lost. After the vote, Waymo expanded from a little over 10,000 trips a week to over 450,000. And in every city, the argument that won over regulators was the same.
It's actually been determined that the Waymo driver is 5 times safer than a human driver.
They say Waymo is involved in 5 times fewer,
11 times fewer serious injury collisions compared to human drivers.
Autonomous technologies never drive drunk. Autonomous technologies, they don't text while driving. They don't change the radio station.
All the concerns raised here are legitimate concerns.
That's Declan Cullen. He's a professor who spent a decade studying how technology platforms reshape society.
You have danger versus safety, right? And when you get caught in that kind of choice, there's only one real answer.
It's not the first time a technology company has won that way. I asked Declan what Lyft and Uber did to expand so quickly.
The technologies were
the best option is to get both. If someone wants to order a self-driving car, they can do it. If you want Uber, just order Uber. What makes it this or that? Is there no option in the middle? Well, like, no, that doesn't really work, because that's what some cities have right now. And the whole problem, as they just said, is that having that competition drives down the wages at Uber, because they are competing with Waymo. They have to be more competitive. They have to get more customers. The only way to do that is to charge competitive prices. I have a feeling I know where they're going with this, because Waymo is probably doing what Uber is doing, which is offering artificially low prices, kind of backed up by Alphabet cash. So like the idea will probably be to push out Uber drivers the same way that Uber drivers pushed out taxis. Having said that, though, like, to the extent that the data is true that Waymo is safer, you shouldn't have Ubers at all. Like, none. Like, that makes no sense. Uber isn't a jobs program. Like, the purpose of corporations is not corporations are not a substitute for a social safety net. Like, you can't just say, oh, well, you know, we're going to go industry by industry and protect the workers from, you know, bad technologies coming into play. This is why sectoral bargaining is quite good, where, like, in a country where that was allowed, because of Supreme Court bullshit, we basically can't have it in the US, which is bad. But if all of the drivers in the country were able to negotiate with industry writ large, then that would lead to some kind of off-ramp or transition or payoff or something. to compensate these drivers for, you know, the fact that they're getting written out of the economy, essentially, which they should, like, they literally should be. Unless the technology isn't the only argument you can make is essentially that the technology doesn't do what it says it does. You know what I mean? If it does what it says it does, then there's no actual reason to have Uber drivers. But I don't think that's realistic. As demand increases, price increases, so don't expect this to always be the same price. Yeah, and then the question comes in, how many Waymos can they build? How many can be in a city, right? And then you can lower the price by having more of them. Other self-driving vehicle like companies might come out, I suppose, though there's a network effect there. But like at the end of the day, the government can regulate how it happens, but if there's a way to replace human drivers with something much safer and it's actually safer, then it should be done. It is a moral good for that to be done. You know what I mean? Like, this is literally saving people's lives.
We're very much framed as apolitical.
What they like about it is complete flexibility, whether you're full-time or part-time.
I think that has really been the true innovation of these companies, has been to change the way we think about the question of work more generally. And so if we think about the rollout of AVs, we'd have to really consider very basic questions of, like, you know, where they will operate, who owns them, who has oversight of them, how they'll be introduced.
Nowhere are
all these are valid. We're going to go over this, but basically all the data we have on Waymo comes from Waymo. This is something I'm deeply critical of and do not like. Though the data, to the extent that people outside of Waymo have looked at it, and a lot of it is backed up by federal data, it seems to be legit, but like, it just isn't good that there isn't like independent oversight of the data, right? So that's bad. Like, so they have a point there. Another thing I want to point out is that, like, you know what a great way to destroy the Uber driver industry is? Building buses and trains. And like, More Perfect Union would never, ever, 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 ever create a video like this if there were just trains being built let's say there was enough buses and trains to put every Uber driver out of business. And let's say the buses were self-driven or something like that, or they're automatic self-driven trains, right? Then like that would also remove all the Uber drivers from work, but they just wouldn't make the video, even though the exact same problem is happening because it's being done by the government instead of a tech company. And like, I think that's dumb. Like, I don't think that's not serious. That's sloppulist bullshit. The more demand increases, the higher the price goes. Also, how much will it take to manufacture the cars? Additionally, companies will raise the prices to maximize profit, blah, 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 blah. That cycle repeats. Yeah, I guess. I feel like the natural progression of things is that building the cars should become cheaper over time, and the demand for taxis goes up. How much is the demand for taxis realistically going to go up, right? Like, will people just use it because it's that easy? And like, if you're saying the price goes up, then less people will use it, right? So I don't think it's so cut and dry as you're saying. I also think, like, on a basic level, like I said, if the Waymo demand goes super high and the prices get insane, one solution is to build a bunch of trains and buses, like, right? Like, this is a fluid environment where a lot of actors can make differences in it. And self-driving is a thing that could apply to trains and also to buses. So like, there's a lot going on here.
Those questions more live than New York, the city with the most taxi and rideshare drivers in the country.
For Americans that are concerned about job loss, about economic stability, we are on the front line of this fight today.
Bedevi Desai is the president of the New York City Taxi Worker Alliance.
A corporation that wants to make its profits from taxi and for hire work cannot avoid New York City. This is the jewel. Drivers collectively serve close to 1 million people every single day.
The fight is not new. New York City built the taxi industry around a metal plate, medallions. They gave the industry structure. The city set the price, capped the number. They became worth enough that people built lives around them.
Buying a medallion is like buying your own little storefront. People could make themselves into upper middle class, have a house, send their kids to school.
Like his dad before, Kuber Sancho Perside is a New York City cab driver. Then Uber and Lyft arrived. You know the drill. Medallions became worthless. Some drivers were left with over $1 million of debt.
This is huge. I mean, what did you just do to the value of a medallion in New York City?
And so Uber drivers were earning below the poverty wage, and so were the yellow cab drivers. In 2018, we had 9 drivers take their life by suicide.
9 drivers. That's what made the news.
There's like drivers like my dad.
New York City needs 100 years just to solve the traffic congestion problem before even thinking about any of those things. This is the mindset that capitalism has put us into, that it's impossible to just build and do shit. And it's not. It's really not. We can build the fucking train. We can build the fucking buses. Like, it's just not, it's not actually that hard. It's the richest country on the damn planet, okay? A couple changes to the estate tax could solve that problem like that. Like, it's really not that hard.
Who just didn't commit suicide, but he drank himself to death because he lost his pride.
That was less than 10 years ago. Now Waymo wants in, and their business may be able to do what Uber only dreamed about. Uber cut wages, Waymo cuts the worker.
Transit has always been a local job, necessarily. This is the first time when it's possible to not have that be the case.
That has massive implications. For-hire driving is a multi-billion-dollar industry. In New York, around 100,000 people drive for a living. Across the country, it's over 1 million. That money moves through the system: rent, groceries, taxes, schools. There's a future where it doesn't.
It's going to be just a hole in the bottom of a bucket of a local economy. You know, just suddenly money just leaves the city in that Waymo.
We've seen this before. Watch the work leave overnight. They even gave it a name. Made it sound inevitable.
The era of globalization had begun.
Yeah? Like, yes, this is an inevitable problem that capitalism faces. It's not an inevitable problem that every system faces. If you have a robust minimum level of living, if you have a robust minimum safety net, you are insulated from the effects of this, and the velocity of money in the economy can take the hit. But the human race should do things efficiently. It should not maintain industries that are worthless because of the workers', velocity of money. This is absurd, backwards thinking. Super dumb.
You know what those towns look like now?
Mark Oliver, I have no idea what your message means. It made me laugh a little bit. And if the ladies from The View are really represented by your account, then you know what? Fine. Hello.
A recent MIT study found that workers in outsourced communities didn't just lose jobs. Their lifespans shortened.
They don't care if we think these services are good or bad. They just want us to think that they're the future.
Buckle up, driverless vehicles are coming to New York City.
I was like, oh boy, they're going to try to force it down our throats again.
They create an aura of inevitability. Uber had done the same.
Meanwhile, the self-driving car industry spent $2.3 million lobbying California regulators alone. At the California Public Utilities Commission, the line between regulator and industry disappeared. One Waymo lobbyist was a former CPUC commissioner. One current commissioner was previously employed by Cruise and refused to recuse himself. In New York State, Waymo alone spent over $3 million lobbying politicians.
If we are going to authorize autonomous vehicles in New York State, it has to be about safety.
The governor was set to follow.
Governor Hochul said last...
Yeah, okay, see, this is another thing. They're basically taking symptoms of the economic system in which we live. Money lets you buy political power. When there is an advancement in technology that objectively makes people's life better, it's negative because people have no safety net, so the velocity of money gets fucked on the lower end, where a lot of the activity happens whenever these jobs just disappear. They're sitting here kind of blaming tech companies, blaming the concept of a self-driving car, blaming the fact that, the force down our throat thing is true in a sense. It was forced down our throat in the sense that Uber offered deeply discounted rides, okay? But people like Ubers more than they liked taxis. This is just kind of a broad fact, actually. People did not like yellow taxis. They suck. They're really bad. The medallion system was an awful experience for the customers using it. It wasn't good. And Uber is also not good in many ways. And if Waymo is doing what it says it's doing, right? This piece is claiming to be about what happens if Waymo works, okay, right? So if Waymo works, that's obviously going to, customers are going to like Waymo more than Uber. And the way it will be forced down our throats will be that people will be buying Waymo more than they buy Uber until Uber can't compete. All of this kind of political maneuvering to shove it down our throat or whatever is true. under this system, ridiculous system we have, Waymo can buy influence that is outsized and undeserved. But if the technology actually does what it says, then in any system, it would kind of like do the same thing. And in countries where there's less ability to buy power with money, you still see stuff like this. Like, people use generative AI in China a lot, and they're very optimistic about it, more so than Americans are. Even though there isn't the same Sam Altman cult of AI, weird shoving it down your throat thing. So like, it's obvious when there is a technology that people are using on a regular basis, like, it's not exactly that it's being shoved down your throat. It's more that like the system facilitates the companies trying to shove it down your throat, and that's bad. But like, if the technology speaks for itself, it speaks for itself. Like the Uber network is better than the yellow taxis. Even after the prices of Uber went up, it's not like the remaining yellow taxi companies, which are few, but they still exist, right? It's not like those companies like surged in popularity and are now like running Uber out the door, right? You know what I mean? Like, you can't just explain it with the network effect. It's literally just the taxis are kind of worse.
Just last month that autonomous vehicles would make New York's roads safer.
It was a Waymo bill. You know, it's not even an AV bill. It's a Waymo bill. Carte blanche for one corporation.
Drivers organized. The political cost became real.
Governor Hochul is dropping a proposal that would have allowed commercial robo-taxi services outside the city.
They understand we don't have a fallback plan for what happens to working people. What happens to the drivers?
That was just one battle. We're in the wars. That war never finishes.
Yeah, the war will never finish, because if New York City builds a bunch more buses and trains and makes an even more robust public transit system, then you'll also lose your job. Like, there are many ways to optimize transportation, and they're all being implemented, and all of the signs point to the fact that Uber drivers are not the best way to do this, and there are better ways to do this.
The next battle was March 31st, where Waymo's New York City testing permit was up for renewal. The mayor let it expire. But as cities push back, Waymo is already plotting a way around them.
I don't think you can lead globally if it's a framework that's governed by multiple jurisdictions. It's a way to slow down the adoption of this technology, not only in the US, but in other markets.
These companies have been very successful at bypassing legislation. So if a city passes legislation that limits or that proposes certain controls, they can move up a level.
This is part of the artificial intelligence industry's broader strategy.
President Trump signed an executive order restricting states from creating their own regulations for artificial intelligence.
This winter, the self-driving cars debate went federal. And when senators got Waymo's executives in a room, they found out every car has someone watching it. The question was, where?
We have some in the U.S. and some abroad.
What percent are abroad?
Senator, I don't have that number for you.
In what countries are these employees located?
The Philippines.
That is completely unacceptable.
Offshoring our jobs just for that, just the convenience to pay them cheaply, is just really sad.
This is not a conversation the industry wants to have, so they changed the subject.
Choice A means seizing the moment. For America,
it's just protectionism, right? It's just like, you can't pay someone in the Philippines to spot check the car or whatever. And like, obviously, again, we're pointing to a larger issue in capitalism, which is that surveillance, because you can buy politics with money, because you can buy political power with money, you can just say, like, you can have extremely lax surveillance laws for private entities, and we do, and that's bad, right? And you could change, that could be changed anytime, but it's not. But they're basically out here like, yeah, it's the existence of AI, the existence of self-driving vehicles is the problem. We should, I guess, I mean, what are they saying? Pay Uber drivers to monitor the Waymos? No, that's bad. Surveillance is bad. So I guess just pay nobody to do it, and then that's good. Like, there's no coherent philosophy here. When I say slopulism, this is what I'm talking about. They're gesturing vaguely at like anti-worker things that harm workers, which are true, and saying you just need to accept that that's like necessarily the way things have to go down, and that therefore just don't adopt the technology at all. They're posing this as a battle against the technology which is not actually inevitable. Like the company says that the technology is inevitable, but actually you can live the next 100 years with Uber drivers, you know, fucking texting and driving and sexually harassing you in the car, and, you know, running over people's dogs. Like they're saying that you can enjoy another 100 years of that, right? Like it doesn't make sense when you give it the barest scrutiny, but it kind of throws treats at certain groups of people who are voters and like calls it a day.
Leadership on autonomous vehicles. Then there is choice B, under which we reject this opportunity. China becomes the global leader. Members of the committee, I implore you to choose choice A.
It's A, America dominates AVs, or it's B, China. And I think there's C, D, E, F, G.
I think it's more should be a hybrid system where we'll still be drivers in the cars, still drivers in the trucks, but we use the AI to help us drive better.
There are other ideas. A cut of the profits back to workers.
It's just wishful thinking. This is like automation of factories. Like even in countries with robust sectoral bargaining agreements, it's more like they had like a big severance package and they accept a lower number of workers. You know what I mean? It kind of chooses winners. There's really no, like, it's kind of sad because this kind of video would convince someone who's maybe an Uber driver that like you could totally have a hybrid system where like, yeah, the car drives itself, but they also give you a living wage just to sit in the car and watch it do its thing. And like, that's not how it should work. There should be a safety net pre-system, like before employment, that provides for your basic needs, and then there is employment. But no, we need to have every industry be a jobs program. We need to skirt around the main actual problem and just assume that Uber is going to be a jobs program forever, and that's the solution. It's stupid.
A tax on every ride, driver-owned investment funds, local government as a concept would suggest locals get a voice in this.
A worker-centered rollout would look very different. It would be slower, it would be more deliberate, it would involve much more political decisions about how the technology works and who it works for. We could think about lots of different policy approaches that emphasize introducing these technologies to benefit not just the public at large, but to kind of help drivers transition to new kinds of work.
But the people deciding the future of this industry don't answer to drivers or cities or riders.
All of us are under the same existential threat of losing our jobs. What happens to us is going to happen to all the workers behind us, whether they are other low-wage workers, predominantly immigrant workforces, or white-collar workers. We've been on the front lines of the fight against the gig economy. We're now on the front lines of the fight against AI.
And this is a strong argument. This is more in line kind of with what I'm saying, which is that like, yeah, like automation will happen, but I think that the proposed solution here is essentially to slow walk all of it and make it so that it all happens very slowly. And at the end, none of these people know how to actually, like, you can vaguely gesture at giving people new jobs down the line, but we know from globalization, from offshoring, all this stuff, like, that isn't how it works. Once you can automate a factory, those people don't get other jobs in the economy. There's no program that can magically turn workers into another kind of worker. Some people can pivot, and they're at the end of the automation process, there might just be less jobs in the economy, period, right? And in a sane society, that's good, right? Because you're like, the wealth that is created by completely automated systems ought to be distributed to society, because every time that any of us has to do less work, all of us should be ingratiated and be able to do less work. That should be the goal. The goal should be to have a self-sustaining society where the wealth is shared in a way that benefits everybody, where the advancements of our economy are beneficial to everyone. But they're not saying that. They're just kind of saying like, yeah, oh, in a good system, we would totally just do it in a slow, measured way, and totally all these people would totally continue to have a job. They'd just have a different job. No, I don't think so. I think that this is wishful pipe dream shit. Like, realistically, if any of this technology does what it says it's going to do, if it doesn't, different story. But if it does what it says it's going to do, then there will be less jobs, and there shouldn't, and those jobs shouldn't exist. They just shouldn't. There's no logical reason to have a shittier version of the same thing when you don't have to. But, you know, slopulism demands that you speak in these terms that offer a solution to nobody, but just go off pure vibes.
This is an AI fight, but it's framed as a AV or autonomous vehicle fight. And I think part of that is messaging to separate us from the AI fight.
That's by design.
The private company has no other real end goal other than to create shareholder value. They're not really beholden to anybody, right, other than shareholders.
And they will still be beholden to shareholders if you slow walk the regulations, right? Like, it's not... If you slow walk the development and the rollout of this technology, you're not like changing the fundamental structure of an American corporation at all. So like, again, I just feel like this doesn't engage with the issue at all. So let's talk about the data a little bit. Like, first of all, there's a good reason that these people sidestepped the issue of like whether Waymo is safer, because literally there have been, from what I looked up, only 2 fatal accidents involving Waymo ever, and neither of them were Waymo's fault. One was in September 2025 in Arizona, where a Waymo was slowing down, and it had its right signal on, and it was slowing down, and then a motorcycle just like slammed into it from behind. The motorcyclist passed away on the street, basically, from another vehicle. Then in January 2025 in San Francisco, there was a pile up, basically, where a black Tesla was going 98 miles an hour and hit multiple vehicles at a red light. I think there was a video of this going around, and one of the impacted vehicles was an unoccupied stationary Waymo car, and due to the reporting regulations, they have to log that as a crash with a fatality. It has kind of nothing to do with them, though. And a lot of the data on Waymo's safety has been looked at. I mean, first of all, it's all kind of mediated through the National Highway Transportation Administration, basically the National Department of Transportation. And Waymo will report crashes, and they report them as either fatal, serious, moderate, minor, or unknown, or none. And they've, like, multiple times, like, my issue is that almost all of the data comes just from Waymo, and there's no like government vehicle that just oversees the data collection and makes sure that they're dotting their T's and crossing their I's, except for like the reports in post can be reviewed by the National Department of Transportation. But as we know, the American government is like not particularly trustworthy. So again, a problem outside of Waymo is creating, like, the environment in which Waymo exists creates most of the problems, not the technology itself. And in fact, they've been caught providing incorrect data before, though I would say it's not like not in a terribly significant way. But for example, I read a post from a reporter basically who covers this a lot. And he was saying that they shared copies of their numbers with him, and they said there'd been 16 injury crashes, but when he looked at it, it basically came up to 18, because some of them they had said, basically they had only counted moderate or serious injuries, and if you counted all of them, there were a couple extra. So instead of 16, it was 18. And then Waymo updated their numbers on their site, but it took someone checking them to do that. So this is a red flag for me. They also classified 2 of those injuries in like the unknown category, so that kind of feels like maybe they're trying to fudge the numbers. But the effect basically means that instead of their purported 73% less crashes than a human driver, it brought it down to 67% less, which is still an insanely better number. Like, this is still a way better situation. And as you know, if you're watching this, if you're an American, you know that traffic fatalities are like a huge percentage of our completely unnecessary deaths in this country. And again, I'm going to reiterate this. A great way to just defeat Waymo, defeat Uber, defeat all of this would just be building more trains and buses, but whatever. Also, like, I'm just going to throw some stats out here also. According to Waymo, 43% of their crashes in San Francisco and Phoenix were less than 1 mile an hour, so like extremely minor fender benders. And they also worked with an insurance company who obviously has a vested interest, not in allowing dangerous vehicles on the road, but actually they'll get their money. Like, the insurance company will get their money in premiums and it has an incentive to kind of ensure the safest possible people. So like I don't think that this is so I think this is a okay source, at least in the information environment where we exist. Basically, when you look at the basic driver baseline that the insurance company has recorded across multiple countries, the property damage claims with Waymo go down by 76% when compared to a human driver. And also, it had 0 bodily injury claims. So like it's just a massive difference. And again, if Waymo has to drive millions and millions of more miles in order to kind of prove its point, because it's being implemented, even right now it's being implemented fairly slowly. But they'll need to drive a lot more miles in a lot more cities to prove that they're right. But a lot of people have analyzed the data, and some that I found was Noah Goodall, who was an engineer who worked for the Virginia Department of Transportation. He looked at Waymo's data and said, like, this checks out, this seems legit, the way they are collecting it is good. He has no professional connection to Waymo, so this revolving door thing doesn't really apply to him. There's also another guy, Philip Koopman, who is a professor of computer engineering at Carnegie Mellon, and like his blog is extremely critical of Waymo, but one thing he doesn't criticize that much is like their data collection. Like he has looked at the data on their safety and said like, yeah, this checks out. His main criticism is actually what I just said, that which is that like they need to drive a lot more miles to really prove that these numbers will hold in all kinds of environments. But that feels like an incentive to try it out in more places, not less. Then there's another guy who was a researcher at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. His name was David Zuby. He looked at the data that they've released in terms of their insurance and their crash ratings and like how good they're doing, and again said that like they're doing good, like this is good data collection. In a perfect world, I would think that there'd be like an entity whose job is to perform oversight over this data, but you know, with the limited knowledge that we have, it really seems like Waymo is going to make the streets much, much, much safer for pedestrians, cyclists, and other drivers. And like, I really want to push back on this sloppulist bullshit because it's not good politics. Like this has an expiration date, okay? Like the big elephant in the room is that people, when all is said and done, when people have the option to buy a rideshare that is that much safer, and if it really doesn't have the downsides of an Uber driver, it's not going to matter how much lobbying money went into it in the first place. At some level, they're going to use it because it's going to be the better service. And like, it's better to have a system that is resilient and plastic and flexible when these threats happen than it is to kind of say, well, yeah, create massive protectionism for Uber drivers. You know, we want a living wage for people who aren't actually doing anything, but only for this one industry. Like, needs to apply broadly to the entire economy. We need a social safety net that works for everybody. We need to make it so that people have a bare minimum standard of spending and purchasing power that is resilient to changes in the economy, so that and ideally some kind of trust or fund where money that is generated by technologies like this is distributed to the people, because it benefits everybody, and in some sense it will inevitably be a public good. Essentially, like if you think about it, what will be the difference between a Waymo network and a network of trains or buses? The ownership. And it's a bit of an arbitrary way to kind of distribute the benefits. It doesn't make sense. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break. I need to use the restroom, so I'll be right back. But enjoy your view of the chair. Okay, thanks for waiting. Oh, okay. How long have I been doing this for? Because I might need to call it a night here. Oh, no, I've got time. All right, sweet, 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 sweet. Okay, great. Let me just close this one out. Close group. Yeah, okay. Okay. So I don't need my headphones anymore. That's nice. I don't know if any of you saw this coverage from Wired, but basically they found a case of like systematic discrimination against, against a lot of people, but specifically against one trans woman who the head of security at Madison Square Garden hated, along with the owner. And these people are insane. And I think that it's a good thing to look at because it's illustrative of the kind of private surveillance state that our system allows to be built and how kind of hideously bad it is. So I'm not going to like read it line for line. No one comes here for that, but I'll summarize the article and I'll tell you my thoughts on it. So you need to know a few characters here. So first of all, Madison Square Garden is owned by a guy named Jim Dolan. And this guy is a petty man. Okay, he keeps dossiers on journalists who don't like him, and he keeps an eye out on the papers for anyone who sells that he should sell the Knicks, which he also owns. He owns Madison Square Garden, the Knicks, the Las Vegas Sphere, and he owns tons of really famous venues all over the US and in New York specifically. Some kind of anecdotes they went over in this is that like he kicked a guy out of a Knicks game for shouting "you stink" at a player, and then he followed up and called that guy's employer and he got him fired. Then he tails people with security all the time. Like one of his favorite moves is to have Madison Square Garden security like chase people around basically so that they feel like they're being like watched the whole time, because they are. So he tailed a season ticket holder with security for saying that he should sell the team. He tails Spike Lee all the time. There's a former Knicks player named Charles Oakley who's like, I guess, very critical of his ownership and of the team in general. He has security follow that guy all the time. One of the craziest things that I saw in here is that he identified every lawyer and every law firm who was currently involved in some kind of lawsuit against him, and he basically had them all banned from Madison Square Garden and any of his other venues. And the reason he's able to do this is because of a crazy all-encompassing basically facial recognition system that Madison Square Garden uses, and I think other venues of his also use it, but Madison Square Garden is the big one. And he hired this guy John Eversole, who's our next character. This guy has been the security chief of Madison Square Garden, or I guess for Jim Dolan generally, since 2018. He's the guy who kind of rolled out facial recognition in the company. The dude shows up to the office with guns, like he'll have like visible shoulder holsters and shit. And when he's yelling at employees, which I guess he would like point at you and like scream at you and shit in the office, pretty messed up. But he would like put his hand on his gun while talking to these people. Like he sounds like a Succession character or something. And this isn't going to come as a surprise to anyone, but he used to work for Larry Ellison at Oracle doing security work for him. So like all of these kind of private entities and their insane kind of panopticons that they're creating, these insane private surveillance networks that they have, there's no oversight. These people are billionaires, you know, they can buy political power, they can stop in any sane country there would just be some kind of oversight or like common sense regulation on how you use these technologies and how they can be implemented, and there should be any reports or kind of individual discrimination that's done by the system, there should be some kind of public repository of how this stuff is used, but none of that is the case, unless there's a lawsuit, which is how this one started, how we got this information essentially, and or like investigative journalism or some kind of fluke. You just never know what these companies are doing. That's exactly how they like it. So there is a person, a woman. There's a trans woman who, my understanding is that she was just rich and loved the Knicks. and was always going to their games. And basically, her pseudonym in the article was Nina Richards, but her identity, is hidden for obvious reasons. What will become obvious reasons. So she got stalked literally by this guy Eversole, the security chief, for years, for 2 years straight. All right, he basically, like, he's watching whatever weird, he's probably like a Joe Rogan fan or something, or he's watching like, sketchy stand-up shows all the time or whatever. He's on some alt-right pipeline on YouTube or TikTok or whatever. So he basically saw that this woman was going to the games on a regular basis, and the staff knew her and liked her and all this stuff. She would take pictures courtside for Instagram and stuff, and she was getting the most expensive tickets and going to box seats and stuff like that. But Eversole would like bring her pictures to weekly meetings and like do this on a regular basis, and he was quoted as saying like, watch out for him or it or whatever it is, acting like she was a threat, even though there was like no evidence whatsoever to suggest that she was. And another thing that he did was like, he would allow people with like extensive criminal records to socialize with the athletes and talk to them and get pictures with them and stuff. But he always made sure that when this woman, Nina Richards, was anywhere near the players or anything, he would like use this. He would put her face into the facial recognition software. And whenever she entered the building, you could just imagine all of these cameras were focused on her. Like they would pick her out of the crowd and follow her around, and he would be on his phone or his walkie-talkie or whatever telling security to block her off from players or to gently lead her away from them or gently lead her away from news or anything like that. He was obsessed with like, if a trans person winds up on camera, it's going to hurt our reputation and it's going to make us look bad and all this stuff. Literally just a huge fan of the show, of the team, huge fan of the Knicks, like, which is something I think people should be allowed to be. Getting punished and discriminated against in this insane way, to the point where here, look, I want to show you something. They would make write-ups of her actions like down to the moment. So like here, 7/10/20 cam 241 scans her ticket to section 2102, whatever, goes up to the terrace escalators, hugs the usher. Then they had in the appendix a picture of her hugging the usher, talking with the F&B worker at the DraftKings bar, paying for the drinks, eating at a table. Like really granular, weird, stalking behavior, essentially. And this is not even weird for Dolan and his enterprise in general. Like, they love to single someone out who messed with them or who they had a personal beef with and do this. But there was no reason for Nina Richards to get targeted, seemingly, other than the fact that she was trans. And this made John Eversole extremely uncomfortable. And I'm sure that there's no kind of psychosexual underlying reason for that. We won't go into it. But look, my takeaway from all of this, and I highly recommend that you go to Wired and you read the whole thing, because it is insane what the private sector is able to get away with in terms of surveillance with like no oversight. But my argument I want to make today is that like modern surveillance tech and the way it's implemented is completely incompatible with modern property rights, which just like allow you to be like a king in your kingdom. Okay, like the effect is that you can be a company or a person who owns these big venues, and you can basically create your own mini state, your own mini fiefdom using this technology. You can use it however you wish. And if people want to go to the most popular and successful venues in their city, then they have no choice but to accept this. And it's very much like the terms of service thing on websites, how like you agree to these terms of service, but you're essentially using goods which you have no way to avoid. So it's not a real, like, there can't be said to be meaningful consent, in my opinion, in this situation. And this is very similar to that. And like on a moral, intuitive level, there's just no way that it's like right and just or fair to allow anyone who owns a venue to install this kind of insane thing and just use it however they want. And what I've seen here is that there's complete impunity, basically. And why is that? It's not because the government can't do anything to stop them. It totally can. The problem is that we have a billionaire captured government. We have people in the Epstein class who are basically, it seems like, all of our politicians are bought by this class of people, and they are seemingly incapable of making any kind of common sense regulations around very obvious moral issues. And it's funny because there's the elephant in the room is that they're always tiptoeing around the rights of people like Elon Musk and Larry Ellison and this guy Dolan or whatever. And all of these private sector leaders, they are in a weird echo chamber, a very weird insulated environment where they have bought into insane right-wing opinions on trans people, on minorities generally. And the result is that all of us are just left to the whims of these people. If they become extremely egalitarian tomorrow, then we will live in a better world. If they become even more right-wing tomorrow, the world we live in will become markedly worse. And I think that in a democratic society, in a society where everyone has a say in the way that they live their life, that's not how things should be. The leaders of these companies and their political beliefs and opinions should not instantly translate into a completely different experience in their venues or whatever, where, you know, these security measures, which on some level make sense, like, you know, intuitively it kind of makes sense. Like there's a lot of threats that could happen at a big in any place where there's a lot of people, especially sports. You know, there's like, you know, sports hooligans all around the world, the scourge of the earth. There needs to be security measures implemented, but we are all living at the whim of these guys, and whether they are just subscribed to an insane ideology or not, like that determines how we will be discriminated against or not. And this woman, Nina Richards, is literally the kind of fan that you would think any of these people would want, but no, it's very ideological. They just don't like trans people, and so that translates into harassing a paying customer, someone who pays more than anyone else basically, right, is in that class of people. And like, the government under our current system can protect you from some types of discrimination, but if the private sector owns the government to this degree, and if the private sector can make these determinations, you're not actually protected. And I feel like this is going to be one of the ways that trans people are targeted, and this is something we should fight back against, which is that the private sector can just do whatever they want to them. It's not going to be like a public campaign. I mean, there is this, I went over this before, where like there are states that are removing trans people's driver's license, but an even more insidious, in my opinion, thing that can happen is that all these private establishments can simply be captured ideologically and can collude to do discrimination against people who absolutely have done nothing wrong. It's innocent people being hurt at the whims of these crazy kind of, I mean, succession caricatures, essentially. Whew. I was going to do one more, but I don't have it in me. So I am going to call it a night, but it's good to be back. It's good to have seen some familiar faces and some new ones as well. So I hope everyone